Good evening, everybody, and welcome to WEHI's 2023 Annual General Meeting. I'm Jane Hemstritch and I'm the President of WEHI. First thing I'd like to do is to introduce you to Wurundjeri Elder Uncle Bill Nicholson, who will welcome us to his country. Uncle Bill.
Yes, thank you, Jane, for introducing me. And just on a broader thank you to the people behind today's AGM, or this evening's AGM, for allowing me to take a little bit of your time for your important general meeting to conduct a Welcome to Country. A Welcome to Country has been a process that has allowed people to feel, I guess you could say in today's language, culturally safe when they've come to my people's land for generations to conduct what I call human business, human interaction or ceremonial processes. So thank you for showing that respect, for allowing me to, I guess, show a little bit of our culture this evening. Keep that in mind, by the way, because it's a real key part of actually feeling truly welcome to this land, which I'll mention at the end. To me, the basis of culture is language. Our language was taken from us 160 years ago, and we're trying to reconnect with it. And I can speak a little. It's called Woi Warang. Wiminjika, Kabamala Mangil, Banambunyalabo Wurundjeri Balak, Nirena Maga Gil Bill Nicholson. I'm welcoming you here for a purpose today, to conduct your business. Greetings, good day from the Wurundjeri people. My name is Uncle Bill Nicholson. I do stand here proudly as an elder of my community because I'm not just representing myself, but I'm representing my family, my community today, my extended family, and thousands of years of my ancestors caring for this country and looking after each other, which allowed us to be here to this day. And just talking about my ancestors, their strength, their wisdom, their knowledge. If it wasn't for these traits, we wouldn't be here. People like Simon Wonga, who was, you might have heard of Wonga Park out in eastern Melbourne. He was our first land rights advocate. He's the son of esteemed Narangita, or spokesperson of the people, Billabulleri, who met someone you might have heard of, John Batman. His predecessor, Wonga's predecessor, William Barrack, you may have heard of him. He's our most well-known elder of the past. He's our first human rights advocate. And if you haven't heard of these individuals before, I always say, do yourself a favour and connect to their story. It's emotional, it's inspirational, and it's part of what I try to encourage non-Indigenous people to learn the story of our people to help yourself connect to this land and understand our community today. I'd like to extend that acknowledgement to the fallen clans, the Maribyrnong mobs, as we say, or the Maribyrnong tribal groups are no longer with us. I'd like to acknowledge them. I'd like to extend that acknowledgement to our community leaders that are in the room today, environmental leaders and cultural leaders here today. We're still working on something which we say in language, Jindi Warabak Balak, which is unity in the community. You might know that word as reconciliation, and I really believe reconciliation as a starting point is starting to listen to one another and building mutual respect for hearing each other's stories. And that's why I acknowledge cultural and community leaders here today who are a real key of sharing these stories and building that mutual respect. We have a creative spirit named Bunjil. He gave us the land to care for, life to enjoy, and the laws to live by. I believe very strongly that we were a very healthy people for thousands of years. The colonial invasion on Wurundjeri land changed that. Unfortunately today, a lot of Aboriginal people do suffer everything from mental health issues to many physical and social health issues that plague our community. As an educator and elder myself, I'd really love one day to actually say that we've actually closed the gaps around these social issues. I know people like yourselves working in the health industry are working very hard to do that. We need to continue to move forward and work together and heal a lot of the traumas of the past. So our boys and girls with Aboriginal identity born within this country have equal opportunity as the rest of the boys and girls born in this amazing country, Australia. So let's learn from the past and never let it happen again and move forward in respect. So the welcoming ceremony, by the way, it's a law ceremony. It's like a passport. It gives you access to our resources. They're sacred in our culture, and it allows you to feel safe. There's a smoke and ceremonial process which allows you to symbolically, spiritually cleanse both yourself and spiritually cleanse the land or the ceremony ground as well. Not lighting fires up here today. Might damage the nice polished floor, so I won't do that. But I'd just like to say, to feel truly welcome under Wurundjeri law, which was never ceded, respect the people, country and culture as part of that law, understand that we all have a responsibility to country and each other, and I feel that today. So Wurundjeri Wurundjeri Bik is welcome Wurundjeri country to us all, and I hope you have a great meeting here this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Uncle Bill. I too would like to acknowledge that the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation were the traditional and are the traditional owners of the land at Parkville, Kew and Bandora on which WEHI operates. I pay my respects and we pay our respects to their elders past and present and embrace their continued connection to the place where WEHI staff and students work. We recognise that Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples were effectively the first scientists on this continent and asked questions and especially looked to the land, the sky, to animals and plants for answers. We acknowledge the ingenuity, the resilience, the design capability and the collaborative and creative thinking of First Nations peoples that enabled them, as Uncle Bill said, to thrive and to ensure that the voices and designs of the first scientists were passed on from generation to generation. How they understood and continue to understand the world has benefited and will always benefit all of us. So welcome to all of you and to those joining us online as well as in person. I'd like to extend a very warm welcome to our patron and Honorary Governor, Sir Gustav Nossal, to WEHI members, donors, bequesters, alumni, current and past members of the WEHI board and subcommittees, consumers, WEHI staff and students, and special guests. I also warmly welcome and acknowledge the presence of my fellow board members, Vice President Sir John Saville, Honorary Treasurer Geoff Roberts, Malcolm Broomhead, Associate Professor Pippa Connolly, John Dyson, Professor Christine Kilpatrick, Mari MacDonald, Professor Duncan Maskell, Carolyn Viney, Dr. Anjali Weller, and Ki Wong. Now, I've been advised by our Company Secretary Joe Kirby that a quorum is present in accordance with Clause 24 of the WEHI Constitution dated 19th of May 2022, not that old, and which means we can go forward with this meeting. And Institute members in attendance can vote and ask questions both online through Slido using the event code WEHI AGM 23, all one word. And you also have the option to vote and ask questions in person if you're here. So the minutes of the 2022 Annual General Meeting held on the 19th of May 2022 have been circulated to you. We've reviewed the minutes and they'll be signed by me as a true and correct record. Does anyone have any questions or comments in relation to the minutes? Well, that's a huge relief. It's now time for me to deliver the President's report and reflect on the year at WEHI since our last AGM. I've been delighted and inspired by the work and achievements of WEHI's scientific and professional services staff during 2022, and by the passion and curiosity of our students, even as the COVID-19 pandemic continued to present some significant challenges to us. As always, the focus of the board and senior leaders has been to position WEHI for long-term success, scientifically, culturally, economically and environmentally, and to ensure the safest and most productive environment possible to support our researchers and our vision. I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge the passing in January of a great leader and friend of WEHI, Sir Andrew Wei. Sir Andrew served on the WEHI board for almost 30 years, including 14 years as president. He was a champion of science and research and worked tirelessly to improve opportunities for scientists. During his tenure on the board, he played an instrumental role in expanding WEHI's Parkville campus, enabling us to accommodate more researchers, and he spearheaded the initiative to form a Human Ethics Committee. Sir Andrew was also chairman of the Felton Bequest, which has been a generous supporter of WEHI's research for many years. His lifetime of leadership and commitment to improving medical research will always be remembered, appreciated, and very much missed. I'd also like to take a moment to express my sincere thanks and appreciation to Professor Jim McCluskey and Rob Wiley, who both stepped down from the WEHI board in March after many years of dedicated service. Jim served on the board since 2011, while Rob was our Honorary Treasurer since 2014. Over these years, their leadership and expert guidance have been critical to shaping WEHI and the Institute, and we've greatly benefited from their contributions. We're deeply grateful for their years of service to WEHI and wish them well in their future endeavours. I'm pleased to welcome to the board Geoff Roberts, who was appointed in August last year and has now taken over from Rob as our Honorary Treasurer. Geoff has more than 35 years of finance experience, including as Group Chief Financial Officer of Seek Limited and Managing Partner of Deloitte Victoria, and also as Group Chief Financial Officer of AXA Asia Pacific for 7 years. His business acumen and financial expertise will be invaluable to WEHI. It's also my pleasure to extend a warm welcome to University of Melbourne Vice-Chancellor Professor Duncan Maskell as the newest member of the WEHI board. He attended his very first board meeting here today. He brings a wealth of experience in academia, research, entrepreneurialism, and his leadership of the University of Melbourne has been marked by a commitment to collaboration, innovation, and excellence. We look forward to benefiting from Duncan's expertise in the years ahead. This evening, I also have the pleasant duty of welcoming 11 new WEHI members, who are Andrew Brooks, Ken Broomhead, Professor Lynn Corcoran, Ern Dawes, Professor the Honourable Greg Hunt, Professor Andrew Liu, Karen Marlab, the Honourable Jala Pulford, Karen Roebuck, Greg Roebuck, and Professor Ken Shortman. As I look back on the past year, I'm proud to say that WEHI has remained steadfast in our commitment to environmental sustainability. The board recognises the critical importance of mitigating the impacts of climate change and advocating for a healthier, more sustainable future for all of us. In 2022, this commitment was reflected in WEHI joining more than 100 health sector organisations in the Climate and Health Alliance, leading action on climate to protect our health. 2022 was a year of milestones and celebrations for WEHI, including the belated celebration of Sir Gus's 90th birthday and also the 25th anniversary of the Art of Science. It was wonderful to join many of our WEHI community to be able to join Gus in the Great Hall of the National Gallery for his 90th birthday gala dinner and the special afternoon tea held in the familiar surrounds of the WEHI Parkville Tea Room. We're deeply grateful to Sir Gus for his continued support and inspiration. It was also my great pleasure to attend the launch of the Art of Science and meet our artist-scientists in person as we celebrated the 25th anniversary of this iconic competition and exhibition. It was inspiring to hear from our Art of Science guest judge, Corey Tutt, OAM, who's the CEO and founder of Deadly Science, who joined us online from Biripi country in New South Wales. At WEHI, brighter together isn't just a tagline, it's a core value. Our continued success would not be possible without the contributions of our generous supporters and donors, the partnership of our many collaborators, both individual and institutional, and on behalf of the Board, I thank all of those who contributed in 2022. Finally, I want to express my deepest gratitude and admiration to our research and professional services teams and the entire WEHI community for their continued passion and commitment. Now, on to the annual report. The annual report for the year ending 31st December 2022 has been circulated to members, and hard copies are available for those who are attending in person. They were on a table outside if you missed them. I now call for questions from WEHI members in relation to my report or the annual report, and I'll pause for a moment to allow members to enter in their questions, and a reminder that you can do this in person or via Slido. There being no questions, I now put the motion to WEHI members to endorse the annual report for the period ending 31st December 2022. Members voting online, please place your votes via the polls tab on Slido. For members voting in person, all those in favour, please raise your hands. Thank you. All those against? Thank you. And I'll pause a moment to allow the online votes to be received.
Jane, yes, all votes have been received and all in favour.
Thank you. I declare the resolution carried. I'm now going to hand over to our new Honorary Treasurer, Geoff Roberts.
Thanks, Jane, and good afternoon, members and guests. I'm pleased to present the Statement of Financial Position, the Statement of Profit and Loss and Other Comprehensive Income, the Statement of Cash Flows, the Statement of Changes in Equity, and the reports of the Directors and of the Auditor in respect of the 12 months ended 31st of December 2022. 2022 saw a return to more normal operations in our research laboratories. Particularly given global economic uncertainty of high inflation and therefore interest rates affecting investment markets, we continue to be very conscious of the need to preserve our investment capital base, and our investment methodology reflects this. Our philosophy is to be in the market for the long term. As of 31st of December 2022, we increased our percentage holding of our investment portfolio in defensive assets to 50%, such as cash and interest-bearing securities. In addition, WEHI holds significant cash reserves set aside for operating purposes. I would now like to present our financial results for the 12 months ended 31st of December 2022. We had a small net deficit for the financial year of $640,000, or a little under $1 million, compared with a $57 million surplus last year. The decrease in surplus of $58 million was due to two main reasons. Firstly, investment markets were less favourable this year. Secondly, last year's results included a final Venetilax monetisation receipt of $28 million and a non-recurring large, very generous bequest of $26 million. WEHI's total operating revenue for the year was $178 million, which included $67 million of federal and state-sourced revenue for research, investment income of $36 million, and donations and bequests of $32 million. 66% of WEHI's operating expenditure was scientific related, 5% was infrastructure and building related, and 13% was expenditure relating to the delivery of WEHI's strategic initiatives. The remaining 16% relates to the professional services such as finance, HR, IT, property services needed to support our important research activities. The small deficit of $640,000, along with an unrealised loss on financial assets taken to equity of $38 million, has resulted in a net decrease in net assets of $39 million to $828 million, a very strong financial position for WEHI to continue to pursue its mission well into the future. We are very well supported by the financial community, and I'd like to acknowledge the contribution of our retiring Investment Committee Chair, Rob Wiley, Andrew Scott, Steve Merlichek, Stephen Milburn-Pyle and Fiona Trafford-Walker, who voluntarily serve on our Investment Committee. I would also like to acknowledge JB Weir and specifically Adam Blennerhassett and Curtis Reid. As the incoming Chair of the Audit and Risk Committee, I've got big shoes to fill. I'd like to express my appreciation to the members of this committee, including the retiring Chair who oversaw huge growth in WEHI for the last 9 years, Rob Wiley, as Jane mentioned. Also Pippa Connolly and Malcolm Broomhead on the committee for their work on this important committee, which advises the board on its financial stewardship of the organisation. WEHI's leadership group and the finance team should also be recognised for their efforts in providing sound financial management of WEHI's resources. Infrastructure funding is critical, and we acknowledge the support of the Victorian and federal governments in this regard. As you can see, WEHI partners with a range of organisations, which means we are truly brighter together. The external audit performed by Deloitte progressed smoothly, and there are no matters of major concern. A Deloitte partner, Sandy Lawson, is online today and can answer any questions members may have on the audit. Members of WEHI now move that the Statement of Financial Position, the Statement of Profit and Loss and Other Comprehensive Income, the Statement of Cash Flows, the Statements of Changes in Equity and the reports of the Directors and of the Auditor for the financial period ended 31st of December 2022 be received. WEHI members, are there any questions relating to the financial reports? Please submit questions via Slido or raise your hand.
No questions online, Geoff.
No questions? I now put the motion to WEHI members. Votes can be submitted via the Slido or raising your hand. For those in the room, all those in favour, please raise your hand. All those against?
And all votes are in the affirmative, Geoff, online.
Okay. Thank you. I declare the resolution carried. Thanks for everyone.
Thank you, Geoff. Thank you, Jane. My name's Doug Hilton. I'm Director of WEHI. I'd also like to acknowledge the traditional owners of this land, this beautiful land, the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, and pay my respects to their elders and thank our Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander scientists for their contribution both to our research and our community. I'd also like to acknowledge Jane's leadership and thank her for all of her contributions to WEHI as a board member and for the last few years as President, as a mentor to the executive team and especially me, and as a passionate and generous supporter of our research, particularly in pancreatic cancer. We also congratulate Jane on her much-deserved honour in being appointed an Officer of the Order of Australia this year in recognition of her outstanding corporate career and her dedication to philanthropy. Congratulations, Jane. AGMs are a wonderful opportunity to reflect, and it's great to be able to look back at 2022 and consider what we've achieved together. My first reflection is that 2022 was a relief. We emerged from two of the most difficult years in living memory for the Melbourne and the global community. SARS-CoV-2 and the public health measures that protected us from the virus impacted every one of us. That we emerged strongly from those difficult years is a testament to the support we've received from you, our members and donors and consumers and supporters, and from the public through the Australian and Victorian governments. Those lockdown years re-emphasised to me that not only are we brighter together, but we are even brighter when we are together in the same physical spaces rather than virtually. 2022 was a year where we celebrated what I'd previously thought of as small interactions, meeting students in the lifts and asking them how their experiments are going, seeing groups of visitors walking down our corridor linking our two buildings, catching up with amazing alumni across Europe and hearing about our research at in-person seminars. 2022 was also a year where we realised that there were benefits in the more flexible working models that had been thrust on us during the pandemic. Being able to work part of the time from home has been game-changing for some of our staff and students. Hybrid events where donors, supporters and consumers can join us virtually has been fabulous for those who live outside Melbourne or for whom travelling into Parkville is difficult. An ability to connect with international collaborators via online seminars is something that we probably didn't dream of doing previously. The challenge in 2023 and beyond is how we balance the flexibility of virtual interactions with the vibrancy and unexpected creativity that can come from meeting face-to-face and the small interactions that sum to a dynamic culture. Among the very special face-to-face interactions of 2022 was the visit to WEHI in July by Prime Minister Anthony Albanese, the Minister of Health and Ageing and Aged Care, Mark Butler, and Assistant Minister for Health and Aged Care, Jed Kearney. And that was very early in the term of the new government and provided a fantastic opportunity for us to represent the medical research sector as a whole and demonstrate its impact in addressing global and Australian health challenges, as well as showcasing the passion and diversity of WEHI staff and students and the impact of our research and the research of the precinct. And you can see the Prime Minister was very pleased to be here. Just as an aside, it didn't get off to a really smooth start. So as usual, I went onto the forecourt and welcomed the Prime Minister out of his Commonwealth car. And I said, welcome to, as Gus showed me how to do when he was director, welcome to the Walter and Eliza Hall Institute, Prime Minister. Just let me tell you a little bit about it. And he said, oh, I know all about bloody WEHI. And I thought, well, this isn't a good start to a prime ministerial visit. And it turned out that the reason that he was none too fond of us was that when he was in the University of Sydney, he, as he told me, was dating the most wonderful girl in Sydney, and she left Sydney to come and do a PhD at WEHI, and that was why he knew all about us. It was also an honour more recently to welcome the Victorian Minister for Health, Health Infrastructure and Medical Research, Mary Ann Thomas, to WEHI. And we never take this for granted, but we thank both the Victorian Government and the Australian Government for their continued support. I'd also like to acknowledge the leadership of Professor Anne Kelso, who's an alumna of WEHI and who's been CEO of the NHMRC for the last 8 years and will step down in the next few months. I've worked very closely with Anne for most of those years, and she cares deeply about the sector, and most of us have no idea about the challenges she faces balancing so many disparate and passionate interests. I particularly want to thank Anne for her profound changes she's introduced to address what is generational challenges in gender equity. It was my privilege last year to be part of the Champions of Change Coalition 2022 Impact Report, highlighting the many ways WEHI is taking action to accelerate gender equality, and also to host a director's seminar to mark International Pronouns Day. WEHI's strategic commitment to advancing reconciliation and increasing participation of First Peoples at all levels of our organisation was exemplified by our new partnership with Deadly Science, which helps foster the next generation of First Nations scientists. We're now working together to co-design and deliver science-based programs and activities for First Nations school students, as well as embedding and expanding initiatives at WEHI to build a pipeline for First Nations people across different levels and entry points. At WEHI, we focus on diversity and inclusivity, both because it's a matter of decency, but also because attracting the brightest minds into an environment where they can flourish is the best way to make discoveries which both excite other scientists, shedding light on how our bodies work at an atomic, molecular or cellular level, but also to translate those discoveries with our partners into improvements in disease prevention, diagnosis and treatment. 2022 was a fabulous year for both discovery and translation. I'd like to highlight 4 of the nearly 500 papers which included WEHI authors. Paper 1 was published in the New England Journal of Medicine and looks at a major problem in colon cancer treatment. That is, how to target chemotherapy to those who will benefit and spare those patients who won't benefit from side effects. Led by Jeannie Tai and Peter Gibbs, who have joint appointments at Peter Mac and Western Health, 2 of WEHI's valued partners, they showed that by using circulating tumour DNA as a marker, they could reduce adjuvant chemotherapy use without compromising recurrence-free survival. And this benefits both patients, their families and the healthcare system. Paper 2 was published in eLife by Matt and Melissa Cool with Misty Jenkins and colleagues at Tel Aviv University. This paper describes the engineering of receptor transmembrane domains to dial up or dial down the strengths of signals in immunotherapy. This work highlights a pathway to tailoring immunotherapy to suit individual patients so fewer people have to cease potentially curative cancer therapy because of inflammatory side effects. Paper 3 was published in Molecular Cell by Bernard Lechtenberg and a number of wonderful students, postdocs and research assistants in his lab. They described the 3D structure of the ubiquitin ligase that underpins the neurodegenerative disease Gordon-Holmes syndrome, and their work continues to emphasise the importance of ubiquitin and shows how mutations in this gene cause disease. And finally, paper 4 is a beautiful piece of work led by a fantastic MD PhD student, Miles Horton, together with postdocs Suzanne Heinzel and Phil Hodgkin, with important contributions from 2 other lab heads, Joe Groom and Shaylin Nayak, and collaborators overseas. Published in Immunity, they show that switching of antibody classes, which is so important for an immune response, is a stochastic process and that it's cell-autonomous and tunable. This opens up an entirely new approach to therapy and builds on Phil and colleagues' work over the last 20 years, which is poised to transform immune health. I'd also like to celebrate the launch of a new clinical trial platform, the Brain Cancer Perioperative Clinical Trials Platform, or BPOP, by the Brain Cancer Centre. And that's an initiative supported by the Victorian Government and Carrie Bickmore's foundation, Carrie's Beanies for Brain Cancer. This trial is led by Dr. Jim Whittle, one of WEHI's brain cancer lab heads and an oncologist at Peter Mac. BPOP revolutionises brain cancer trials by allowing us to test the effect of new treatments after a biopsy but before surgery. And this provides a means of both tailoring therapies based on the characteristics of an individual patient's tumour, as well as understanding how that tumour has responded to a new medicine. BPOP and the Brain Cancer Centre more generally delivers on the urgency to do the very best by patients diagnosed today, while creating the collaborative structures and assembling the support required to make the discoveries over the next 5, 10 or 20 years, discoveries that will truly revolutionise brain cancer outcomes. The Brain Cancer Centre also provides a model for how we would like to conduct and support research in other areas, including immune health and Parkinson's disease, dementias, devastating cancers and childhood diseases. And I look forward to discussing these programs with you in the coming weeks and months. Deriving benefit for patients and our communities takes more than just success in our laboratories. WEHI actively fosters a culture of entrepreneurship and partnerships to support the development of strategic collaborations that enable the translation of our research. To do this, we need partners with deep pockets. Depending on the project, we will partner with venture capitalists or biotech companies like CSL, and not-for-profit entities like the Wellcome Trust and Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. I was very excited that the WEHI spin-out, Accrue Therapeutics, merged with Boston-based Intact Bio to develop a completely new type of medicine. Intact Bio will maintain research activities in Australia hosted at WEHI with the scientific leadership and direction from Professor David Commander and Dr Uli Nakbar. I was also really delighted that Cicada Innovations was appointed as the independent operator to manage our biotech startup incubator, which is a partnership by WEHI, CSL and the University of Melbourne. And I'd like to acknowledge especially Jim McCluskey, who was a passionate advocate for this project, for his support, and also the team at CSL. This wouldn't have happened without these three wonderful organisations coming together and without the support of the Victorian Government through Breakthrough Victoria. The incubator will be Australia's first to be located within a leading biotech company. I know there will be lots of time over the next year to thank people who've made my journey from undergraduate student to director at WEHI possible, but as there's a possibility that this might be my last AGM, I'd like your indulgence while I thank some special people who've made this and my past 15 AGMs possible. At the top of my list is Jackie Hoysted. Is Jackie here in the room or has she disappeared? She's probably up in the box there. Jackie's masterminded the last 9 AGMs. I think of Jackie as the Sam Kerr or Michael Jordan of events. She is the GOAT. And for those of you who might not know what the GOAT is, it's the greatest of all time. Thanks also to the wonderful Maureen Grant, who organised my earlier AGMs. I also want to thank Simon Taplin, Wendy Hurton and Cameron Wells, for whom there is no such thing as too last minute, for their poise and patience in working with me to put together my speeches and presentations. I want to thank Alistair Brown and my previous CFOs, Murray Jeffs, Kim Chai, Ian Coulson and Joel Chibbett, for their finance teams for the work that they do with the auditors to prepare our financial report. We receive an incredible amount of funding from the community via grants and philanthropy, and we take the responsibility for spending it appropriately really seriously. But even more seriously, we take the demonstration that we spend it appropriately through that audit incredibly seriously too. Thanks to Megan, Auld and my past heads of communications, Penny Fannin and Carolyn McDonald, for their preparation of our annual report and its evolution into a much more publicly accessible document. Thanks to the IT team up the back, especially Colin and Nilesh. And I also want a special thanks to all 33 of the board members, including the 3 treasurers, the late Roger Mail, who I miss dearly, Rob Wiley and Geoff Roberts, and the 3 board presidents, Leon Davis, Chris Thomas and Jane Hemstritch, with whom I've been privileged to work. Thanks also to Jo Kirby and her team in governance, risk and compliance for herding the board and management cats and choreographing the AGM day, which involves not just this meeting, but also a board meeting and board subcommittee meetings. And thanks to other members of the WEHI executive, Carolyn McDonald, Liz McMahon, Anne Dew, and Alan Cowman for their unfailing support and astute input. Finally, I want to thank my EAs over the last 15 years, who more than anyone get me to the Davis Auditorium for the AGM in one piece. Linda Scott, Kelly Roger, Fiona McGrath, Fenny Wirajaya and Chelsea Hodgson. I'd like to finish by thanking all of you. One of the best things about being WEHI Director is you never have to beat up a story. The staff and students create the most wonderful discoveries. They're passionate, they're exuberant, and it's easy as a director to stand up and tell their story. And their story wouldn't be possible without our members, donors and supporters. Thank you all. And now I'd like to introduce Megan Auld, who's our Head of Communications and Marketing, and she's going to tell us about our new website. Megan.
Well, thank you very much, Doug, and what a fantastic director's report. You went all out, that was excellent, and it has been an absolute privilege working with you, but thankfully not time to say goodbye just yet. Hello to everyone in person today and to those online. For those who don't know me, my name is Megan Auld and I'm Head of Communications and Marketing at WEHI. I'd also like to acknowledge Sir Gus in the audience today. So lovely to see you. It's a privilege to have you here. Okay, so let's start with our current website. Why are we upgrading our website? Well, an organisation's website is a digital representation of its value proposition. An effective and engaging website can help to establish credibility, trust and engagement with its audiences. Our current website was built in 2014, and while it has certainly served us very well, it uses ageing technology, has an outdated design and doesn't quite provide an optimal experience for our wide range of audiences. So last year we engaged an external agency with deep expertise in web design, user experience and search engine optimisation to help us develop a new website that will showcase WEHI's incredible research, rich history and collaborative culture. So following an extensive discovery and consultation process, and some of you will have been involved in that and we thank you for your time, including industry benchmarking, ideation workshops, stakeholder interviews and surveys, user design prototyping and a full information architecture audit. Who wants to do one of those? We are now at the fun stage of the project, the final design and build phase. So I'll give you a sneak preview today. This is just the staging site. So while the content is still under development, this is how the new page, the homepage is shaping up. Inspired by global best practice, both within and outside the medical research sector, the design intent is to create an authoritative but modern and intuitive website to better reflect WEHI's research expertise and personality. We have flexible content modules, so our content management system in the background is flexible and functional to allow us to drop in content modules easily when developing or updating a web page. We're using content funnels to help with navigation and allow users to more easily find what they're interested in. We're taking a more editorial approach to news content and a more accessible contemporary design throughout the website, drawing on global best practice such as Time Magazine, Harvard University and the Mayo Clinic. Our discovery and consultation phase gave us valuable insights about the need to make our disease content more accessible to non-scientific audiences, such as donors and potential supporters. We know that patients, carers and donors tend to be disease-focused based on their personal experiences and interests and want authoritative but understandable information from credible sources. We also need to make their journey to finding out more or donating simpler and more engaging. Another key finding was that we should hero our biomedical animations as they are a point of difference and showcase WEHI's incredible science in a visually stunning way. We've really leaned into this with a Netflix-style presentation of the extensive gallery of animations developed by Dr. Drew Berry and his team over many years. But perhaps the most significant advancement is the data integration work we're doing to connect the pieces of the vast content puzzle in the background. Disease areas will be tagged with any researchers working on that disease and vice versa, in turn connecting with research areas, technologies, relevant clinical trials, fundraising campaigns, news stories and more. Data tagging using a vibrant secondary colour palette will enable intuitive discovery of content for users and also underpins a vastly more powerful AI-enabled search function, including fuzzy search to handle alternative spellings and misspellings, which I'm guilty of myself, and delivering tailored search results. A key objective of the website is to attract the best talent globally, although we've got a lot of it already. We're enhancing researcher profiles to better connect to relevant content across the website using the data tagging I just mentioned, and we'll be able to display multimedia content and showcase publications, awards and discoveries and any bespoke content needed. For the first time, we're introducing lab profiles with lab membership automatically pulled from our people data source, Workday, to enable up-to-date display of team members without manual effort. Lab profiles were a popular request from our researchers. They allow more personality to be showcased to highlight the culture at WEHI and will help with talent attraction. We're working hard to launch the new website and hoping to go live in June-ish. But with 1,948 pages of content and comprehensive data integration and tagging, it's no mean feat. That's all I have time for tonight, but I'd like to acknowledge the hard work and imagination of the comms and marketing team, the support of the advocacy and support committee members who help steer our efforts, and in particular Lucy McPhee, who has been leading this complex project with poise and excellence. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Megan. It's normally traditional to have Drew Berry present animations at the AGM, and we had planned for a 25-year celebration of his animations, but he is sick tonight. So the good news is you will get 26 years history of his animations next year. That does allow me to move on and introduce two of my favourite faculty members and lab heads at WEHI, Gemma Kelly and Andrew Wei. They work in the blood cells and blood cancer division. And it reminds me of a moment more than 40 years ago when I first was introduced to blood cells during a vacation scholarship at the Australian National University in the John Curtin School of Medical Research. And I was up there reading, in their library for part of that, reading two books written by a person I'd never heard of, Don Metcalf, from an institute that I'd never heard of, the Walter and Eliza Hall Institute. And I can only describe reading those books as like falling in love. It gives me the same tingle down my spine. It was the beauty of the blood cell system and the mystery of how all of the molecules came together to regulate that beautiful system. I still get that tingle today, and it's a pleasure to have Gemma and Andrew talking to us about the big challenges for blood cancer research. Andrew is up first. Welcome.
I'd just like to thank Doug for giving Gemma and I the opportunity to say a few words about what we're doing in blood cancer research and some of the challenges we're trying to address. Each person is born with about 10,000 stem cells, and the mighty job of these stem cells is to make 100 billion new blood cells every day for the entire person's life. Just as Darwinian evolution favours selection of the fittest, the same processes can unfortunately lead to blood cancer because of selection of clones which have performance-enhancing variations which can lead to clinically symptomatic disease. There are many different faces to blood cancer. In fact, there are over 240 named subvariants of blood cancer. And each year in Australia, about 20,000 people are given this diagnosis of blood cancer. The three diseases which cause the most deaths in relation to blood cancer are lymphoma, myeloma, and acute myeloid leukemia. And these are the three areas which our division has its research focus on. I've been treating patients with acute myeloid leukemia for 20 years, and for most of my career, the only therapy that I've had available at my disposal has been chemotherapy. Many people will be aware that this institute has played a pivotal role in the fundamental discoveries and the clinical trials which led to the deployment of the first small molecule able to target BCL2 and to create this as a clinical reality for patients with chronic lymphocytic leukemia. I was fortunate enough to work as a PhD student in the lab of Professor David Huang and Andrew Roberts on a precursor to this molecule, and then I went back into clinical practice. 10 years later, I was able to open a clinical trial which utilised this drug called venetoclax in combination with low-dose chemotherapy. The first patient that I treated was a 72-year-old woman, and she had a bone marrow full of leukemia, and we knew at that stage in 2015 that conventional chemotherapy was unlikely to work. We would have to deliver the chemotherapy for several months to even know if it was working, and even if it did work, we knew that it was not going to give her many months of benefit. Needless to say, this lady didn't hesitate to go on to the clinical trial involving venetoclax and AML. And you can imagine it's hard to describe the feeling when 28 days later we look down the microscope and having worked with David and his team 10 years ago, now looking at the drug being delivered to a human and seeing that this drug in combination with low-dose chemotherapy had completely dissolved this lady's leukemia. She went on to receive 20 cycles of therapy and experienced 4.5 years of leukemia-free survival before the disease eventually came back. Venetoclax plus low-dose chemotherapy is now a standard therapy for over 40% of patients with AML, and the drug is utilised in over 80 countries worldwide. And many consider venetoclax to be the most important therapeutic advance for patients with this disease. Despite venetoclax and many other new therapies which have been delivered to patients with AML, we still face enormous challenges. And that is because although we can achieve a response in almost 70% of patients now, in many patients the disease comes back. And every time the disease comes back, it's selected for clones which are more resistant to therapy and ultimately more difficult to treat. So where do we go from here? We know that we need to deliver more drugs which have greater efficacy and more targeted properties to our patients. We know that we need to combine some of these drugs to find more effective regimens. We now have new technologies which can actually enable us to detect the leukemia at several orders of magnitude below the light microscope, which might enable us to deliver these new treatments earlier, with the hope that earlier intervention will lead to longer-term benefits. And finally, we know we need to study samples from patients with resistant disease to try and understand the mechanisms of resistance and to direct future strategies. So we have in fact incorporated all of these principles into a first-in-world clinical trial called Intercept, which is currently open in Melbourne and Queensland with a goal of opening in 15 centres around Australia by the end of the year. And we will deliver all of these new principles of clinical practice in this country to try and make further advances for patients with AML. Before passing over to Gemma, I just wanted to highlight we still have one major problem which is considered to be the biggest unmet need for patients with AML, and that is patients who have a mutation in a gene called P53. We now know that about 1/4 of all patients with AML over the age of 60 have this mutation in P53, and it is completely untreatable at the moment, and life expectancy is less than 6 months. One of the most intriguing observations is that we can use these new technologies and we can identify this P53 mutation present in the blood of patients months and sometimes years before they're actually diagnosed with AML. What we don't know, however, is what are the processes which transform a stem cell with this P53 mutation from a benign stem cell into one of the most lethal forms of acute leukemia. And I think if we can understand these processes, then we might have the opportunity to try and find ways to try and thwart this process and to make a paradigm change in AML from not just treating patients with active leukemia, but perhaps even trying to prevent leukemia from developing in the first place. And I think this is the major goal which we hope to pursue over the next few years. Although I left WEHI in 2005 to go back into clinical practice and work as a clinician for the next 17 years, I actually came back to WEHI last year. And I just want to acknowledge that this was made possible by a fellowship provided by Don Metcalf's family. And I just wanted to thank them for allowing me to continue on my research journey and to work with great people like Gemma Kelly. Thanks, Gemma.
Good evening, everyone. So I'm Gemma Kelly, and I'm one of the scientists here at WEHI. And one of the things that I really enjoy about working here at WEHI are these really close links that we have with clinicians, that we get an understanding of what the major problems are in the clinic for patients, and that kind of focuses our research. And so, as Andrew mentioned, one of the things that's a major problem for patients are mutations in this gene or this protein called P53. And actually, it's the most frequently mutated gene in human cancer in general. So it's mutated in about 60% of diverse cancers. And so this protein in its normal function, when it's not mutated, it's so important to prevent you from getting cancer. And I like this statistic, which is, humans, we have 2 copies of P53 and we get cancer pretty regularly, whereas elephants have 40 copies and they get really old, but they rarely actually get cancer. And I think this so nicely demonstrates how important this protein is at preventing cancers from forming. Now, the sad reality is really that most people who have a P53 mutated blood cancer, they will die within 5 years of their diagnosis. And this is regardless of their age and it's regardless of their treatment. So this is a major, major challenge in the clinic that we need to address. So there's been kind of decades of research now into this protein and how it functions normally. And we know quite a lot, but we certainly don't know enough. So we know that it's so-called a tumour suppressor protein. Essentially, it puts the brakes on the tumour cells. And it does this in a variety of different ways. So when it becomes activated, it's able to... is that for me to go off already? It's able to activate kind of hundreds of genes, and they do a few different things, I'll just use the pointer here. So they can alter the metabolism, they can stop cells from growing, it can actually kill cells, and it can help repair damaged DNA. And this together prevents you really from getting a tumour. And actually, many anti-cancer drugs, they work by activating P53, such as conventional chemotherapy. And what you hope that they're doing really is pushing the cells down this route here towards killing the cancer cells, as opposed to kind of pushing them towards stopping growing, and then they can hang around, and potentially then they can pick up more mutations and then have relapsing disease. And as I said, despite kind of decades of research into this protein, we still don't really understand what dictates whether a cell goes down one route or whether it goes down another route. And in terms of cancer therapy, we really want to understand how to push them down this route so that they're killed and they have no potential to come back as a relapsing disease. So we thought this is the big question we want to answer. How do we induce more cancer cells to die after P53 activation? And this is really a question that I've been working on and thinking about with my mentor, Professor Andreas Strasser, for many years now. And what we decided to do is to work with WEHI's Magic Lab, which is Marco, Andrew, and Lynn. And this facility here makes these really sophisticated genetically engineered mouse models. And these kinds of preclinical models, they allow us to really dissect into things in much more detail than we could do with, say, for example, patient samples. So what we decided to do is to make so-called reporter mice. So these are mice in which we've linked a gene that we know is really important for each of these different processes to a fluorescent protein. So, for example, when P53 becomes activated in this mouse model, and it goes down the route of stopping growth, the cells will become green, so we can actually track them. In this mouse, if they start to get the program to kill the cells, then the cells will turn red. And so this is just an amazing way of being able to look in real time at how cells are responding to P53. And you can even then do this in a live mouse within the bone marrow. And so you can really look at when P53 is activated with, say, for example, a radiation or drugs, what's actually happening to those individual cells. And this became the focus of a PhD project for Annabella Thomas and also for Lizzie Lishko. And it's only really made possible by the expertise we have at WEHI, which comes from Georgia and Edwin, who are just phenomenal at imaging. So they can image into live mice, into actually their bone marrow in real time, and they can see what's happening now with our reporter mice. So these are some images that Annabella generated. So on this one here, this is in our so-called green mouse, and you can see that the cells within the bone marrow are responding and they're becoming green. In this mouse here, those cells that start to die turn on the red protein, and so we can really see what's happening. And what's really good about mice is, as probably everyone knows, you can breed mice together. And so we can actually breed these two mice together and come up with something like this now. So now we have a mouse that can report on these two different cellular processes at the same time. And I hope what you can see within the bone marrow is that we've got our red cells, so these are going down the pathway of death. We've got our yellow cells, so these have activated both the growth arrest and the death program at the same time. And we've got these kind of green ones. And we predict that if you're thinking now in terms of a cancer, it's these green cells that are the problem. These are the ones that they're just stopping growing. They're not dying. And these are the ones that we think are now going to hang around, potentially get more mutations and come back as a relapsing disease. And this is something that we're really interested in now. So we have many blood cancer models now crossed to these reporter mice. So you can treat them with the standard of care drugs, and some will die, but essentially some will stay. And what we think is they get more mutations and it relapses. And what we're looking for really now are drug combinations where we can see everything becomes red, everything starts to die, and we get eradication of the blood cancer. And actually, Sarah Deepstratton in my lab and Dietsche Coloni are working on this. And they've already found a drug combination that is just so effective. And this is a drug which is actually already in the clinic on a different purpose. And when you combine it with a BH3 mimetic like venetoclax, you can get really potent killing of blood cancer cells, so AMLs and some aggressive lymphomas. And even P53 mutated disease as well. And so we're working with Andrew Wei's group now to get all the evidence that we need in order to now go back into the clinic and try to get a clinical trial that we hope really will benefit our blood cancer patients. So I hope what we've shown you really is some of the challenges that are faced for blood cancer patients and how we can kind of move from the clinic into the lab and then back into the clinic to hopefully improve the outcomes for blood cancer patients. So I'd like to acknowledge the people in our group. So this is my lab and this is Andrew's lab, and we apologise for just showing a very small amount of data that they've generated. And then we have many, many collaborators here at WEHI, too many to mention by name, our clinical collaborators and our industry partners. And we're particularly grateful to the cancer patients and families who donate samples to our research. We're well supported by funding, and we'd like to say a special thanks to the Metcalf family, as Andrew said, who support him and his research, and the Dyson bequest that support me and my research. And we're happy to take any questions you may have. Thank you.
You can see why they're my favourite lab heads. That's just beautiful research. Questions for Gemma and Andrew? Yeah.
This isn't a question, this is a thank you. I'm sitting next to my husband who got AML 5.5 years ago, and he's had a clinical trial for 2 years. He's now on the venetoclax, and here he is.
Thank you. That's really lovely to hear.
That was not a planted question. I just want to say that. That was lovely. Okay, thank you. Wonderful talks.
Good evening, everybody. So my name is Marnie Blewitt. I'm the Head of Education and I also run a division here at WEHI. And it's a really great pleasure and probably the best part of the job with Head of Education to be able to welcome new undergraduate students that are winning Metcalf scholarships and also celebrate the success of two of our best PhD students that had their thesis passed in the year before. So while that's really exciting, every year there's a little ball of stress inside my stomach saying I might pronounce somebody's name incorrectly. And the reason I worry about that is, of course, because we all want our names, our beautiful names, to be said correctly. And I remember my PhD graduation ceremony where the professor that was handing out, shaking our hands as we walked across the stage, not across the road, I shall point out, had the kind of unfortunate situation where they pronounced somebody's name Hermione, and we all knew they didn't get Harry Potter, and they were clearly behind the times. So anyway, we're going to try and avoid a Hermione incident tonight, and if we have a Hermione incident, you can talk to me about it afterwards, and hopefully I'll improve for next time. So I'm going to start by announcing 7 new winners of the Metcalf scholarships. So the Metcalf scholarships were created in honour of the beloved Institute researcher Professor Don Metcalf, who passed away in 2014. So since these were created, in that time, thanks to the generous donations of many of our donors, we've been able to welcome 50 Metcalf scholars as undergraduates into the Institute. And they've all been brave and bold and done wonderful work around the Institute, and many have stayed on beyond that time that they started as an undergraduate. So tonight I have 7 more to announce, which is a great pleasure. So the first of whom is and I'm going to invite them up to the stage to shake hands, the ones that can be here, is for Jinmin Gao. And so if I can have the... Whichever way you want to go. Yeah. The second one is Raphael Jones. The third is Lucy Mather. The fourth can't be here tonight, but that's Jocelyn Na, so we'll provide that to her once she starts at the Institute. The fifth is Cindy Shen. Next up is Franklin Xian. And the last of the Metcalfs for tonight is Wanran Zhang. I just learnt that I was one of Wanran's lecturers, so that's always nice to then meet. So the second lot of prizes that we're awarding tonight are the Professor Lynn Corcoran PhD prizes, and these were created in 2017 to honour our top PhD students who had their PhDs passed in the previous year. And so this award honours Professor Lynn Corcoran herself for her tireless contributions to student education and PhDs in her time here at WEHI, but of course also the 2 winners that we have tonight. So the first one is Dr. Sarah Garnish. She's from the Inflammation Division, and her PhD title was Profiling a Killer, MLKL-Mediated Death and Its Role in Human Disease. And the second is Daniel Simpson, also from the Inflammation Division. So any students that are here, obviously you know which one to take up a PhD in. The PhD title is A Genetics-Based Investigation into the Regulation of RIPK1 and Caspase-8 during Cell Death and Disease. So Daniel can't be here tonight, but James, his supervisor, is going to come up to accept the award on his behalf. Supervisors deserve credit too, obviously. Okay. So I think if I just double check, yes, that concludes all of the presentations I need to give to tonight. So well done, everybody.
Well, that brings the formal business of the meeting to a close, and I want to thank both people in the audience and online tonight for joining us. For the in-person attendees, you get the drinks and the snacks outside. For the online audience, I'm sorry. I hope to see you in person soon. So good night, and thank you all so much for joining us.